I am back with another American terror.
Skinwalkers.
Have you heard of them? This is an excellent book. It's not supernatural, but it features these horrifying legends of the Navajo. It's a mystery. I like it a lot. Now, from the ages of 8 years old to 20, I lived in Provo, Utah. We had vanishingly few black people in town. There was exactly one African-American student in my final high school year. She was super popular, though, way out of my class. We also had a few Hispanics, but not that many. Our main ethnic minority, in fact, was Navajo Indians. So I got to know quite a lot of them. I like Navajos. I like their food. I love Navajo Taco Day at the school cafeteria. My wife still makes them once in a while. They're not really tacos despite the name, but they are terrific. I also love the Navajo dry sense of humor, their laconic speaking style, their accent. They're great people. The Navajo are the biggest Indian tribe in the U.S. by far, with the best organized government, police force, lobbyists. Anyway, in 1978, I took a college class called Fantasy and the Literate Christian. It was, a religious college. Now, we were assigned to read one fantasy book a week and report on it as a class. It was a great class. I was even allowed to participate in some of the classes design before I started because I was renowned. I mean, not renowned, but I knew a lot about, fantasy. 2 professors were in charge, though, not me. Now, one of the professors told a story that really impressed me. In a different class, he was teaching Arthurian legends, and he told the story of when King Arthur was out hunting wolves, and he cornered a wolf, but instead of attacking or fighting, the wolf bowed its head, crept forward, and started trying to write on the ground with its paw. Arthur was urged to kill the wolf by his knights, but he kept it safe and he let it write. And the wolf wrote the tale of how it was once a noble knight. His wife secretly loved his seneschal. So one day, using black magic, they snuck a drug into the knight's wine that turned him into a wolf. The transformed knight ran off into the woods, and the seneschal and the knight's lady took up with each other and ruled the nice land. Well, King Arthur, of course, was furious at this dire evil. He found a way to turn the knight back into a man. Then he confronted the evil pair who'd usurped his place. They were themselves forced to drink the drug, turned into wolves, and I think they were then executed. I'm not sure why they had to be turned into wolves first, or maybe I'm not remembering the end of the story right. It doesn't really matter, because the important thing is the professor's discussing this tale with the students, and he made the statement that, of course, werewolves aren't real. And a Navajo girl in the college class spoke up. "That's not true," she said plainly. "Werewolves are real. I've seen them." Well, the professor, instead of just dismissing them, had her explain, and she told about the Skinwalkers, the Navajo wolves. Now, these are evil witches, men or women, who perpetrate terrible crimes, murder, incest, theft, and they gain the ability to turn into a wolf. Now, the Navajo girl had seen a person on an isolated rock, hunched over, crouching. When she called out to the person, it seemed to deform itself, kind of fall inward, and then a wolf ran away from the place. Now, her cousin had been chased down the road once by a wolf that ran more than 50 miles an hour. Her cousin's pickup truck was actually ripped off by the wolf while he was trying to get away from it. Apparently, the wolf couldn't keep up when he really hit the gas. But when the professor doubted the cousin's story, the Navajo girl just looked at him pityingly. "My cousin would never lie to me. Plus, it's not just him. Many, many Navajos have seen skinwalkers or suffer from their effects. Sheep that are killed without being eaten, children stolen, wells poisoned, and so forth." Now, my professor wasn't convinced that werewolves are real, but it made him think a lot about the nature of fantasy. You see, he thought he was telling a fun little story about a werewolf. But to the Navajo girl, the knight's wife and her seneschal, who turned her husband into a wolf, were the darkest evil and deserved everything they got. The professor then considered the story further. You see, when that story was written, the original audience also believed in witchcraft and transformations, so their take on the story would have not been the same as ours. It's worth thinking about. But going back to Navajo wolves. So as it turns out, the United States has actually a really strong werewolf history, stronger than Europe's. Not only the Navajos, but other Indian tribes, plus the French immigrants to Canada and Louisiana also know about these creatures, usually called the loup-garou. I don't know if they brought them from France, because France had the most werewolves in Europe, or that they just were able to recognize them when they got here. Now, a loup-garou is not just a werewolf. In fact, I've read lots of loup-garou tales and encounters, and it's clear that these things can transform into a lot of targets. They can turn into rabbits, they can turn into cats. In one story, the loup-garou actually turns into the moon. In fact, the loup-garou seems to be exactly the same entity as the Navajo wolf, an evil witch who gains the power to transform to harm other people. Now, I've talked to Navajos. They really don't want to talk about the skinwalkers. Now, of course, I'm sure just some don't want to talk about them to a Billigana like me. Why would they? I can't blame them. And I'm sure that there's plenty of Navajos that don't believe in these things. But the question still is, what is a Navajo wolf? I assume you have reason to disbelieve the French-speaking Arcadians and the Navajos, evil witches in league with Satan or the coyote spirit. By the way, that coyote as a spirit is widely known among Native Americans. Some think he's a trickster, some kind of a hero. Now, my old boss, Greg Stafford, really liked coyote, but he learned about coyote through a different Indian tradition. The Navajos, for them, coyote, while he's important, is starkly evil. You don't mess with coyote. A lot of Navajo wolf tales follow the same pattern. The narrator saw someone in the back country who suddenly drops to all fours and runs off as a wolf, or a wolf chases a car at supernatural speed, or a wolf or person circles around a house at night, rattling, peering in windows, trying to get in at the door, jumping on the roof. A wolf or a human jumps in front of a car trying to cause an accident. Now, the Navajo wolves aren't just wolves. They have other supernatural powers, such as mind control, disease, and so forth. Here's a sample story. A man heard laughter from his sheep pen. Going to see what was happening, he saw one of his rams standing straight up and laughing like a man. He looked closely, and the ram's eyes were human, not animal. Maybe this helps explain the goat man. Is he a Navajo wolf? Or I guess a Navajo goat? In the 1980s, a white family driving through Navajo land saw something black and hairy, but wearing clothing, crawl out of a ditch. A few days later, at their home in Flagstaff, far from Navajo country, 3 dark shapes were seen outside their house. They could hear them. They were chanting. They tried to climb over the privacy fence. The creatures eventually gave up and left, but this was a case of these things going way outside the usual territory. Also, we have this case. In 1878, the Navajo tribe, then on a reservation, ferreted out 40 people and convicted them of being skinwalkers. They killed all 40. And the tribe then stopped suffering from a number of problems, including sheep death, disease, and starvation. Were these 40 people skinwalkers? Who knows? The tribe thought so. I guess they ought to know. Some fun facts about wolves. A wolf's bite has a force of 1,500 pounds per square inch. That's twice as much as a German Shepherd of comparable size. Now, the wolf that lives in the Navajo lands is the Mexican wolf. It's a subspecies of the gray wolf. It's not exactly the same as the timber wolf. It's one of the most endangered predators of the United States. I'm really happy with the efforts to return them to our ecology. This doesn't mean I approve of skinwalkers, you understand, just like the real wolves. So, are there really Navajo witches who turn into monsters? Beats me, but it's pretty cool to have them as villains in scenarios and stories, and they are still believed in today. Like me? Subscribe to me, click for notifications, and you can buy material I write besides just these American terrorism videos. Thanks!